We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's show, we're going to be discussing what's happening with Israel, Palestine, and college campuses across the United States of America, what's happening overseas in Israel, and we also have some talk about the Supreme Court and their new code of conduct. It's going to be quite the show. Let's get started. College kids and even professors seem to be engaged in pro-Palestinian activism to a degree that frankly shocks the mind and spirit. Now, how do a bunch of American kids get so fired up about a war in which American troops are not even engaged? Well, we're very fortunate to have with us today Liberty Nation's editor-in-chief, Ms. Lisa K. Donner, who wrote about just this topic. So fingers crossed, we should have an answer. Thanks for being here, Lisa.
Good to be here with you, Mark. Yeah, this has been kind of a perplexing issue that cropped up out of nowhere, or it seemed to, and I've done a lot of research.
That's the
and
thing.
written
Let
a
me
couple
just
of articles.
Let me just point out that your coverage of this has been superb. You
Thank
followed the trails everywhere on this about why such activism is taking place, how it all gets there, and you can read about it under the Lisa K. Donner byline on the pages of libertynation.com. If you haven't seen it, get there and go there.
Well, indeed, Mark Levin tweeted out one of my stories, and I think research really helps people understand. But let's start with the latest that's happened, and that was on November 14th. 300,000 pro-Israel people showed up in the U.S. Capitol. This, this compares to last week. The U.S. Park Service stopped giving numbers because it got to be too political. But I have heard that 300,000 pro-Israel people showed up this weekend. As for last weekend and the pro-Palestinian, I have no number for that. But anyway, it was massive.
I can throw a number in for you, Lisa, not that specific one, but in the UK on Remembrance Sunday, which is obviously the day beyond the water, there was around 300,000 pro-Palestinian.
Right, that's what I'm thinking of, the pro-Palestinian protest in London, not in the district. You're absolutely right. But here in D.C. On the 14th, it was massive.
Yeah.
It was peaceful. And it made the point that there is I call it a quiet majority. Richard Nixon coined the phrase silent majority. This is not a silent majority, but they've been a kind of a quiet majority to support the Jewish people and their right to a Jewish state. So that was kind of an interesting and very moving day for anybody who supports Israel. And that begs the question: who supports Israel? But I'll ask you first.
Well, let's get to the big question. Let's get this one out of the way. What's behind the sheer gung-ho activism on the college campuses? Because I know the answer because I read your article that went out last week in this. But if you'd like to enlighten our listeners, that would be great.
Well, there's two things really fueling all this uprising on the college campuses for the Palestinians and Hamas, etc. One is ignorance. If you want to put it nicely, we'll say a lack of education.
Yeah.
And the other is money, always follow the money. And that tells quite a tale as well. Yeah,
you wrote that from 2014 to 2019, there was, I think, $13 billion was given to over 200 different U.S. colleges and universities. The largest donor being Qatar, which happens to just be the home or the home base of a bunch of Hamas leadership. And they gave almost $3 billion. So,
right. So now that you've taken all my talking points,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It is, you pointed out correctly, it's mind-bending amounts of cash. And what happened was in 2020, remember former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos?
Yeah.
She commissioned a study, and she kind of wanted to see, who's spending what on college campuses. And they came up with, at the time, they found $6.5 billion with a B of what they called undisclosed foreign money. Now, these grants are allowed to be made to colleges and universities, but there's anything over 250,000. They're supposed to disclose.
Yeah,
they're supposed to report them, and they didn't. And so at the time, the big dust up was really about China and how much money China was putting in. But under the radar, like you said, flew all these Arab states, including Qatar, which is the home of a lot of Hamas leaders, as we well know now. And
Do you know another big home of Hamas leaders, by the way?
hit me with it, babe.
London, living in
Oh,
what we call
really?
council houses, many of them collecting welfare, but are still engaged, because why not?
Wow.
Collecting British welfare, yeah, which
Right.
many people believe is a hotbed of political corruption. I'm not one to say, but there you have it. A lot of
No,
people believe. I couldn't possibly
no
comment.
comment. No comment. Well, when I was researching, it was interesting. There's another study that popped up by the Network Contagion Research Institute, or NCRI. And what they said was, and again, this is going back to 2014 to 2019, but they said that there was such a boatload of, foreign money that was pouring in. And they noted that institutions that accepted money from the Middle East donors had, on average, 300% more anti-Semitic incidents than those institutions that did not. So they were able to correlate the money that came in from Arab countries and the amount of anti-Semitic incidents. And by the way, if you want to talk, what do they call them now? Hate crimes. Jews suffer 4.5 more hate crimes than Muslim or Arab, even if you put Muslim and Arab together. And that's not according to me. That's according to the FBI statistical.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's
information.
obviously the reason why Joe Biden sought to address that issue specifically, directly, the anti-Semitism that takes place. He sought to address it directly by appointing Kamala Harris, again, another czar of Islamophobia. Oh, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. But apparently that's what the Joe Biden does now. Now, Lisa, I think the questions that we've really got to ask here, the most important question that we've got to ask is, what do the institutions think the money is for? They certainly can't see it as, well, here's some largesse. They must love us.
Well, I mean, let's face it.
What do they think?
As a nonprofit educational organization, do they really care? I mean, if somebody wants to give you, a couple $100 million, do you really want to ask them so many questions? I mean, I don't think you do.
Lisa, without derailing my integrity, if somebody did want to give me a couple of $100 million, please do contact me through libertynation.com. I'm your man. I am your man.
You won't ask it. You won't be asking too many questions.
No questions asked, which really kind of proves your point, right?
Well, it's interesting because I carefully quoted Christopher Marlowe, but I got some blowback from that. But I said there, it was a little bit questionable whether he said it or not. Do you remember the quote?
I do remember it. I do. Money doesn't buy love, but it sure improves your bargaining position. Is it something like that? Yes,
that's exactly it. Well, whether he said it or not, and he probably didn't, but it certainly was apropos of the moment. I think what's happened is things have turned on college campuses, but with the hierarchy, the presidents, the boards, and these are 200 colleges, is a lot of colleges and universities, including the big ones. Of course, they gave to all the Ivy Leagues. It, may have bought them some love, but it definitely bought them silence. I mean, there hasn't been too much of a blowback from a lot of these educational institutions. Suddenly they're all, free speech, when that wasn't necessarily the case.
It's funny how quickly
Ann Coulter wanted to get on Ann Coulter's free speech had to be, zipped.
Oh yeah. Well,
and uninvited.
Everybody's getting uninvited from college campuses until, of course, it suits them to be bastions of free speech. Lisa K. Dunnett, we'll be back with you after this short break. Listeners, don't go anywhere. It's going to be quite the show.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.